Jimmy, this is your 7th album, is that right?
True.
And a live album. How do you feel primarily about...
Wait a minute, 8th?
It's your 8th album. That's, yes,
Eighth.
you're totally right. This is your 8th album.
Yeah.
This is your first live album, isn't it?
True, yeah.
Was there any kind of particular courage needed by yourself, or Robert, or Bonzo, or John, in putting out a live album as against...
Well, look, let's say this. It is a live album primarily, but it is a soundtrack as well, because we've got live recordings of concerts going back to '69. Albert Hall and Madison Square Garden again, Forum in Los Angeles, and yet we haven't put them out before. In fact, there was a plan at one point to put out a chronological live LP, which would have been fun, you know?
Yeah. As apart from being a rock musician, how do you feel about almost primarily being a film star, literally overnight?
I haven't even thought of it in that way at all, just a sort of an appearance every now and again, really, because to me the whole thing's basically a musical, you know, and there are different sequences, you know, the make-up, montage or whatever, but it's not acting as such, is it really? It's just appearing and showing your face, you know.
Tremendous things have happened to you since 1968, really, haven't they?
Oh, too true, yeah.
Are there any particular moments between 1968 and 76 that you qualify as being the highs of your total career at this particular stage?
Well, there seems to have been a build all the way through, really, which has sort of overwhelmed one. But I do remember one particular point that sort of knocked me flat on the backside, so to speak. We went to the States after having not put out an album for 15 months or something, and not having been there for a year. And the very first 2 concerts, the first one being Atlanta, had like 53,000 people there, and the next one, Tampa, Florida, 57, and suddenly I thought, my goodness, what's going on, you know, it's crazy. You know, it's the way that people were really just, you know, flocking to us with this great loyalty. And the sort of promoters that were saying, oh, they'll never do it, you know, nobody's going to turn up because they haven't put out any product. And it suddenly occurred to me that, you know, we had a different sort of following to most people. And, you know, that sort of thing is obviously very warming to the heart and the soul, you know.
Were you very happy initially at having a very different following from the usual following that follows rock musicians?
I think really it's, as far as groups and audiences go, groups, especially on live shows, you know, they're as good as the audience, really. The audience, I've seen some shows where the audience has been better than the group that I've gone to see sometimes. Let's put it this way, pacing the history of the group, so to speak, an album will come out, say the 3rd LP, and there was a lot of more acoustic numbers, there's more of a total mellow mood than, say, on the 2nd LP, which was like a rock and roll one, really. And the critics gave it a bad time because they expected us to be in sort of groove that they could relate to, you see,
sure.
And it was too much of a shock. But we'd gone through changes within our own lives, and it reflected in the music, as it has up to now, sort of thing, you know. And it's very encouraging to find that the audience as such can relate to those changes and still be with you, you know. That's really great, you know. Yeah, sure.
Do you ever worry about an image that you have of being extremely heavy?
What, the sort of heavy metal thing? I think we managed to erase that sort of tag and cliche that got put on us. Around about the 4th LP, to anybody that was still doubtful about us and wondering really where we were at and everything, when Stairway to Heaven came out, they realised that we were a group that was intent on change, and there was far more of a dramatic quality within our particular brand of music than, say, the, so to speak, heavy metal groups. You know, there was more going on within it, within the framework.
At the advent of Led Zeppelin, did you feel that that in fact when you developed some kind of musical policy, that it was very important that your audiences came along to identify with the particular thing that they thought Led Zeppelin was? Was that a worry at all?
Well, no. In putting the group together in the early days, you know, I had an idea of what I thought was right within those days. it didn't really matter whether it was going to sort of happen or not within one's mind, because it was so enjoyable to be playing. And one could feel the chemistry was there even from the very first day of a rehearsal, that there was something there that was definitely going to be really good and really enjoyable to be part of. We never really bothered to purposely engineer situations which we knew would be acceptable to audiences or critics.
Yes,
in fact, it's been quite the reverse, because you know, we've come under the hammer a number of times just by sticking to one's guns, and I mean, if one has sort of composed a certain amount of songs at one time and they've gone on an LP, because basically an LP is only where you've been, you know, collectively at that time. Obviously, if one knows there's a change of direction or something, maybe a group could say, well, wait a minute, wouldn't it be better to sort of stick to the usual policy to keep it, you know, keep the identity and everything there. But we've never done this, you know. Obviously, it's been we're very highly critical of what we do, but it's, as I say, the band is a band highly intent on change, and you know, sort of ever onward, pressing as far, you know, through the boundaries as one can possibly go, you know.
Sure. Jimmy, do you think there was any kind of reason why audiences developed almost overnight for Led Zeppelin, particularly in America? I mean, America happened first, didn't it, really?
Well, yeah, I think the fact was we were really a very earthy group, and as I say, there was this exploratory thing going on within the music, and at that time there was a lot of apathy setting in, and
what kind of apathy, actually?
Well, it was just at the end of the San Francisco phase, well at the end of that.
Yeah.
And I remember that's in fact where we really took off in San Francisco, and Country Joe was on the bill, and one of the other San Francisco groups. But there'd been like a very sort of, almost like a brotherhood of groups over there.
Yeah.
And they just knew these people inside out. And suddenly somebody was there really laying it down, and of course they just reacted to it. And the news of that particular night just spread like wildfire over the States, and suddenly we'd made our mark.
Did you have any particular plan of attack, of musical attack, or musical structure?
No.
On your very first night in America before an American audience?
Well, no, only the amount of stuff that we'd written. I mean, to be quite honest, you know, I'd been in the Yardbirds before, and obviously I had a lot of ideas that I'd built within the Yardbirds that hadn't gone down on record or everything. And I sort of, you know, worked on those a little bit as a framework, because obviously when you start a group, you've got to have a certain amount of framework, unless you're going to do other people's numbers, you know.
That's right, yeah.
And there was obviously overtones of that, and of course that erased itself as we, you know, continued.
As a member of the Yardbirds, were there burning musical policies within you itching to get out that you couldn't fulfill with the Yardbirds?
Only at the end, because they'd, you know, Keith Ralph, bless his soul now, but it got so just generally brought down with things. I don't know what it was really underlying everything, but I remember him saying one day that the magic of that group left him when, or it disappeared when Eric Clapton left the group.
Yeah.
And that had been many, many years
That's
before
right,
I joined, you know. Obviously that was the way he saw it, the band, you know, and it was just very, very difficult. It was an uphill struggle to keep them at it, and they just didn't want to know anymore. So eventually that band split.
Yeah, sure. But how did you actually physically go about the formation of Led Zeppelin, the finding of them?
Well, I wanted to carry on for sure, because I had a certain amount of faith in, you know, certain reactions that one had experienced in the States, you know, with the Yardbirds, and other places, Australia too, and England too. And Terry Reid was a singer that I remember having worked with on a bill, the same bill rather, I should say.
And an enormous singer too.
With, it was a Rolling Stones tour, and when you think about the bill now, it's amazing. There was Ike and Tina Turner Review, Terry Reid with band then called Peter J, Yardbirds and Rolling Stones. I mean, you just don't get bills like that.
No, right.
But anyhow, I tried to track him down, and lo and behold, he just signed with Mickey Most. But he suggested Robert, so I tracked up to Birmingham, and saw him, and I was amazed, you know, and suddenly it all started to come together in a very short time. It wasn't like a year's process of getting it all together, which seems to be the usual thing. I mean, the whole thing came together within a matter of weeks.
When you first saw Robert, can you remember your immediate reaction?
Yes, I did. It was very strange, actually. I thought there must be something wrong with this chap, because if he hasn't got on, because, you know, the quality of his voice was really, you know, striking. I thought it must just be a personality thing. Mm. You know what I mean? I mean, he'd made records and this, that and the other in Birmingham, and I just couldn't understand what it was that had held him back.
When you actually first approached Robert Plant and spoke to him, can you remember what you said to him?
Well, I made reference to Terry Reid, and I said, you know, I think we should, you know, get together if you're interested. Come down and, you know, spend some time at my place. We'll go through some sounds, some records, see if we've got the same idea, you know, if we're sympathetic, and take it on from there.
He was very aware of you, of course, was he?
Yeah. I mean, he knew what we were, you know, that there was this thing of forming a group, you know. And then, well, we seemed to get on pretty well, you know. And he was very blues-orientated, and of course I've been through that as well. And then I played him a lot of other things, which I planned to sort of attempt, like Babe, I'm Going to Leave You and things like that, which, you know, had a totally different approach to the way that it had originally been done by Joan Baez. And he seemed to be into all of these things, so it was definitely on, you know.
It was a real gelling of...
Yes, it was, for sure.
Apart from his ability as a singer, and obviously as a musician, did your personalities gel? I mean, did you like each other? Or?
It was that. The only thing was, I remember he was doing a lot of West Coast music, which I had an aversion to.
Why was
a lot of Buffalo Springfield
What did you like about it?
Well, I just, you see, there was an image over here of the West Coast scene, and actually a lot of the bands were very, very poor. The quality was terrible, and I could understand how he'd become involved in the whole, you know, this great sort of family image of groups all together and everything, but, you know, it's, I wasn't about to tell him that, in fact, the music was awful when you actually heard it live.
When you had this feeling yourself about the quality of West Coast music...
Ah, now what you're saying, you see, what you're saying is broadcasting an opinion. Well, I wouldn't normally do that. I'm only doing that almost, you know, within conversation here. I mean, for instance, say, I'll give you two examples. Buffalo Springfield, I saw them, and they had the sort of balance. Obviously, the musical content was totally different, but say, the Hollies, if one ever saw those in the old days, a perfect balance, perfect harmonies, everything was completely routine, right down to the line, and that's how they were. Yeah. Now, I went to see Jefferson Airplane, and they began their set with a bass solo, which was absolutely phenomenal. And these were in the days of the whole, you know, apex of the San Francisco scene, and I thought, well, my God, this is going to be just the end of the world, you know, when they start. And then they began playing, and I couldn't believe it. They couldn't keep time, and it was awful. You know, it was just a great shock, you know. But it was only a personal opinion. You see, as far as the social importance of it, you know, the social attitude, it was very important. And so, you know, I'm only speaking on a musical point.
Yes, sure.
You know.
And from Robert, you gathered for Led Zeppelin, for the completion of Led Zeppelin?
Well, John Paul Jones, somebody that I've worked with many times before, on studio dates. And John Bonham, Robert had played with, and fought with, but in the past. And he was playing with Tim Rose at the time,
That's
so we went to see him. And he was... well, there were two people, actually. It was B.J. Thomas of the Procol Harum.
Yeah.
And Bonzo. Those were the two possible drummers, you see. But when I saw Bonzo, I knew that he was definitely on, you know.
When you think back to your very beginning of a thinking human being, which is sometimes very hard, and sometimes very clear and very easy to assimilate almost immediately. I mean, I remember you being musically sparked off by Chuck Berry, etc. Is there something even before then?
Yeah. Baby Let's Play House by Presley.
Yeah.
That was a record.
Even before Elvis Presley. Can you remember the musical thing?
Oh, what, the first sounds that I ever heard?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Stan Kenton, I should think.
Yeah.
Those sort of things. But the first rock and roll thing that really turned me on, and I went, wait a minute, what was that? And it was Baby Let's Play House.
It was the very first time you'd heard
Yeah,
it?
and that's when I wanted to play after hearing that. I thought, I want to be part of this.
What did it do to you, and
it just sent shivers up my spine.
and how did you devise in your own mind, how were you going to become a part of this?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know at all, but I was just determined to sort of be part of it, you know? Because in those days, there just wasn't anybody playing. You know?
That's right.
You know, you may find one other guitarist, but he'd live about 30 miles away somewhere, you know.
Had you at that particular...
There was no textbook, let's put it that way.
There was what?
No textbook,
Sure.
which there is now.
Had you at that stage picked up any kind of instrument? I mean...
No, not really, no.
And you had
Not
no...
at all, I wouldn't say not at all, no. And I think somebody had given a guitar to the family just soon after hearing that record, and you know, it just sort of happened that obvious sort of process of one day finding somebody who knew how to tune it, and then one was away, you know.
Did you...
And then went through the rock and roll phase,
Yep.
you know, Rick Nelson's guitarist, James Burton being a great influence, Chuck Berry, then B.B. King. All these things started to unfold, all the different styles of guitar, the electric styles anyway, and then becoming involved in, you know, the classical music, and you know, really seeing the guitar as such an important instrument, and so many different approaches and styles that could be, you know, employed upon it.
Did you buy a book with chords on it, or did you finger it round and work things out for yourself? Or?
I don't know, I think I probably just used to take all my frustrations out on it, like some people smash plates against walls, you know.
Yeah.
Mainly it was just trading things with other people, you know, and then once one got an ear, you could hear it from records. You heard a record, and you think, well, I'll try and play that solo, and that's really how it started. And I think all the other guitarists the same way too. And you started to try and emulate what you heard, and before long you could play those solos note perfect. So then you started to follow these good guitarists, so to speak, that could play in your own mind well.
Yeah.
And each time the next record came out, you'd buy it, and you know, a day later you'd have the solo off. So bit by bit, that's the way one taught themselves, you know.
Can you remember some of the frustrations that made you want to play a guitar?
All I remember about it was taking it to school and having it taken away every time it was seen. Yeah. So trying to hide in the corner of the field to practice. I used to try and play the thing all the time, you know, to improve. And it was sort of confiscated and given back at the end of the day.
Do you think it detracted from, let us say, your possible academic skill?
No, not really. Certainly not to the degree that obviously the staff would have thought. You know, I think but nevertheless, I would have thought one of the most important things about this music is the fact that it wasn't taught, that it is self-taught, almost like a craft, you know, and that it has evolved through through the young folk, through the street, and it's been a social statement, you know. And so it should really go hand in hand with any academic subject.
When you started playing a guitar, when you first heard Presley, was it the start of a personal rebellion against society, against rules laid down as to what you should?
No. It didn't really occur to me at that point that that's what they would, that's what was going on within the lyrics and everything. That became evident to me through Chuck Berry and what he was singing about, and suddenly the coin dropped, and I thought, wait a minute, you know, this is what he's saying, and no money down and things like that.
That's right.
Incredible stuff.
When you heard it, when you heard No Money Down, when you first heard your first rebellious lyric, as against all you'd been taught to accept.
Well, Baby, Let's Play House. Come and move in with me. I mean, that was 1956 or 7 or something. It just, you just didn't do those sort of things.
That's right.
Live in sin. You were, you know,
and
almost excommunicated, weren't you, from society.
Right. And you thought what?
Well, I more so than actually the lyrical content, which hit me later. You know, as I say, it was just the musical thing, the fact that it was so vibrant, and that you could feel that they were really, I can't just say enjoying what they were doing. It was just a total commitment and involvement.
And
I mean, I'll tell you one thing, at the end of Mystery Train of Presley's, you can hear him laughing. I don't know whether you've ever...
That's
just
right.
on the fader. And it's just things like that where it's like they know that they're doing something which is revolutionary almost, you know, within musical fields, and they're just so into it and committed to it. And that sort of dedication and conviction, I can sympathise with, you know. especially when I viewed what was going on around me in other sort of music, you know, the Guy Mitchell days and things like that. It just had nothing going for it at all.
Because it is quite amazing, you know, when I interviewed Robert at one particular stage of my career, I asked Robert about music and the initial spark that made him go, well, hey, what? He talked about Rosemary Clooney and Where Will the Baby's Dimple Be, which I think that if you actually played to a public in 1976 and people associated with it being in the initial spark for Robert Plant, they would be absolutely, totally blown and couldn't believe it.
I'm blown away too, to be honest. Yeah, that's incredible.
It really is very odd indeed. Do you ever look back upon old records that in fact you liked, say, in your very early childhood? I mean, do you listen to them now and say to yourself, my God, what was that all about?
No, I don't.
Or do you still find
I can still
validity
see,
in them?
yes, I do, especially in the, you know, Jerry Lee Lewis and people like that, Eddie Cochran. You've got to remember how young they were at the time. And you say a record like Mean Woman Blues, something like that by Jerry Lee Lewis, 17, 18 years of age. Well, who's doing anything as good as that now at 18 years of age? No one. That's the point. And they were innovators. They were doing something new. They weren't relying on a whole textbook that's been laid down for them. Now, these people, you know, just... Something just happened at that particular point of time, you know, this whole thing, just there was this whole thing blossomed within a whole collective number of people and it just came out, you know. But that's the thing that knocks me out, when you think that, you know, like the ones that have sadly lost, like Eddie Cochran, Buddy Holly, you know, died before they were, what were they, 22 when they died?
Very young.
I mean, the amount of stuff that they laid down. And then when you think of the music that, say, has been laid down in the time between, and you look at the younger ones, you know, say the pre-20s, you know, there's not that much there. That hasn't really been really cribbed right from blues or from rock. And that's the thing that impresses me, doesn't it?
Jimmy, is there a danger, let's say 1976, of trying to be, or in fact, not even trying, but being over-creative?
No, I don't think so, no. You know, it's scratching the surface almost at the moment, but I reckon another 5 years it's going to be. There's going to be this is what I'm saying, the younger people are going to be coming through, and then it's really all going to happen. It's, you know, I really think it's going to be an exciting musical heritage to be looking forward to.
Yes.
And it's needed, all this sort of, this great fight that went on in the 50s and the 60s and everything else, to open up the doors almost, to let the flood come through, you know, to break down the barriers.
Right. How much influence do you think that the Beatles exert on today's breakout of rock music generally?
I don't know about today. Certainly at the time, you know, the social question poised by the Beatles, you know, the long hair and this, that and the other, as it was called long hair then.
But of course in long hair we've only recycled again, haven't we, in fashion?
Well, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It only got cut off because of the wars and lice and things like that.
That's right, yeah.
But I think at the time, you know, it certainly a lot of change went down, a lot of social barriers. Again, were broken down, class barriers, even though it may have been resented afterwards, but nevertheless, they helped to do that. And over the years that they were very musically prominent and productive. And I think there's a classic example of a group who shows so much development and maturity within their music within the years that they were together. I mean, let's face it, the early records aren't, you know, they're nothing to really write home about, but by the time they were at Magical Mystery Tour, I mean, it was really going some, you know, really.
Would you, as an eminent musician of the 60s and the 70s, advocate that in fact there is possibly room in our educational structure where people who are gifted immensely musically have no need to go through all the academic studies that they may never use, stick entirely to music, really from the moment it is discovered that they have ability?
Well, you see, now you're posing a whole question of education, the whole system of education, and let's face it, as it is, it's pretty much a waste of time. As far as my own education went, I didn't really receive any education, as far as I'm concerned, until I went to an art college. And then somebody sort of started to talk to me as an individual, as opposed to like a number in a room. And,
what did that do for you?
And there was more, well, the point was, you see, at that time, within art college, there was debates. One would, people could discuss between themselves and with the staff certain aspects of what you were doing, whereas in the classroom at school, you shut up. That's the sort of thing that was just totally hopeless, and it wasn't long before you realised that the people that were supposed to be teaching you were fools. However, in these times now, I think it's, I know it's changed quite considerably. You've got some damn good people within the education system. But that's, as I say, as far as my own education, that's how it was. And as far as just concentrating on one particular thing, no, I don't think it's a good thing. I think that one should be versed within subjects, but not necessarily to the degree where it's almost a specialist degree. Like I've said, trigonometry, calculus, I've never used any of that since I left school, nowhere at all.
Do you feel that it was a waste of time learning it? I mean, has it helped you at all musically?
Well, no, not in the way that it was taught, though I have in fact become familiar with Pythagoras' approach to music and scale, which relates to mathematics. But that, I mean, I could have approached that with possibly 2 or 3 years of school tuition in mathematics. The whole thing's just it was just a silly status game to just get as many GCE subjects as you could, and, if you were a bright spark, you'd get onto university at the end. But I can, it's difficult. I don't really want to, obviously, this is a sort of thing that can be debated. Somebody could raise or throw a lot of points at me to sort of poo-poo the argument. But I'm just thinking about friends of mine that were at school and the ones that carried on through university, and most of them carried on through a very, very heavy academic system and went through the whole bit, but at the end of it, they ended up doing something entirely different that didn't relate at all in one possible way to any of the education that they'd received.
Jimmy, in relation to our previous talking about the composers of today and, in fact, the spread towards, in the future, major works that will be acknowledged by the public at large right around the world, what kind of part do you think Led Zeppelin can take in this in the future?
Well, I don't know whether it can take any at all.
You don't?
No, but I'm only thinking of the sort of experience that they must have felt, the first time of seeing or experiencing, like the Ring trilogy, Wagner, or the Rites of Spring with. Or the Ballet Russe and all these sort of things all tied up together. This whole environmental experience. I mean, let's face it, we've lost a lot that we're not really aware of in the old silent picture days. It wasn't a jangly piano, it was an orchestra in the big cinemas, and there were sound effects. Now, if you imagine some of those Cecil B. DeMille epics with orchestras and sound effects, it must have been amazing, but we just think that they had jangly pianos, but that was when it reached the, little suburbs, Hey on why.
Yeah, right.
But say somebody like Hendrix, for instance, who tied up all the loose ends of, say, the different, approaches of rock guitar, at least, and blues, and recording, too, facilities, and what could be done, and really laid it down. There's somebody that is very sad to be lost, as far as I can see, because he was really doing some amazing work. Not ahead of his time, but intellectually way ahead of the others.
But in his time, yes.
Yeah.
I think that when people view the film, The Song Remains the Same, there will be many things they want to ask themselves, and the one that I'd like to ask you, and I hope you can answer it to some degree, is what you think about whilst you're on stage playing incredible, intricate guitar.
I don't.
You don't?
No. It sounds really pretentious, but it's
no, it
like
doesn't sound pretentious.
It's like a trance state, honestly. You just don't think. The more you try and plan something, the more you're likely to make a mess of it. It's just like you almost have to cleanse yourself almost of all thought and everything, and then you start playing, and it starts to gel with everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, there is obviously certain amounts of direction that go on, but the more programmed it becomes, before going on especially, the more plastic it would appear. You know, there's so much improvisation that goes on, and so many times where you'll just be playing something and staccato rhythms will just fit. You know, in total synchronization, and you'd have no idea that it was ever going to be doing that. You look at each other and wink, and you know that it'd never come again. But
yes,
there it was. You know, it's one of those things.
It's amazing that watching you visually in a performance, it is amazing that you are also totally obsessed with the performance, and as you say, you seem to be in another world. And then all of a sudden there is the sly wink and the sly smile.
Yes.
And
yeah. But don't you think that most I mean, actors themselves, when they're, I mean, I've always had the impression that an actor, when he takes on the part within a play, he becomes that person. I mean, it's just a total involvement within it. And that's just how it is with the instruments. You know, you're just totally involved in it. It's just a part of you, an extension of you, and yet sometimes maybe you're an extension of it. It's like driving a car, you're part of the machine. You know, it depends how you look at it.
would you find it very hard as a person to be a part in your life perpetually from Robert, Bonzo and John?
I'll be very disappointed because of the amount of, you know, the alchemical quality that seems to be with us, you know, and the sheer excitement that's generated within just even a rehearsal, you know. And it would be a great shame. It's a great energy source.
What is the tremendous thing for you personally and collectively as a group appearing in front of American audiences?
Well, the feedback.
Yeah.
You know, really...
What is the difference, Jimmy, in the feedback, say, from America and Australia and England?
Well, I think the American audiences, and it has to be said, they are far more involved in the musical scene, and by that I don't mean the image, but the creative side of it, what's being said lyrically, you know, and what sort of barriers are being sort of broken down, you know, and boundaries, ones are being smashed by the music. They're really more interested in that, I think, than some other countries.
Yeah.
And they really are totally, you know, involved on an intellectual scale in a way,
Yes,
you know,
surely.
to what is being said. And that's how they sort of mark, you know, the people that they sort of can relate to by what they're actually saying, you know, in their music and lyrics. And obviously, you know, the prime example of that is Dylan.
Yeah.
You know, he just captured the imagination of an age.
Would you be disappointed if an audience ever reacted voluminously to a whole lot of love, yet not...
Well, no, because you see, the whole thing is we don't do that anymore, that number. Well, obviously, there comes a time when, obviously, you've put out so many LPs that you want to give a taste of this, that and the other, and give as much contrast and light and shade within a performance, especially if you're playing for a long time. Otherwise people are just going to get up and walk out if it's all the same sort of stuff. And at this particular point, well, the last tour, so to speak, we weren't doing that. We just did a few bars of it, and then it went into something else.
Yes,
We didn't even sing one verse.
Jimmy, when you come back to England from an American tour, or a tour in the world somewhere, and you come back to the tranquility of your family life, is there a void in your life at all?
Well, it never stops. I never stop being involved in it. I always you know, writing it or playing or doing something, you know. It's there all the time. There's no escape.
Jimmy, thank you very much
Okay,
indeed.
thanks.